So hi, good afternoon, and good evening for those of us around the world. It's getting to be evening time here. Again, thank you so much for inviting me. I've been sitting through the sessions and they're just fantastic. So my name is Alicia Moniz. I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about AI. And what I really like to do is I really like to talk about enabling AI for everyone. So my background is I'm a data guy, traditional data warehousing and analytics, and many years in the reporting space on the Microsoft BI stack. And over the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity to start working with these AI tools. And what really kind of speaks to me is that when I first started learning the tools, I had a mental block that said, you know, AI was this special and complicated thing, and it wouldn't be something I'd be able to learn. And, I'm going to have to work with other people with this skill set to learn these things. And as I've been working with the tool set and working with the Microsoft community, it's just amazing how easy Microsoft is making AI to use and how integrated it is in the Microsoft ecosystem. So I really like to pitch my presentations towards enablement and kind of lower the barriers to learning about these technologies. So I am a Microsoft AI MVP, and I do like to speak at various events. I'm also a past member. And 1 second so I can get to my slide. And so I speak at the past summit every other year or so in Seattle. And again, most of the time I am speaking to data professionals, but I find I have the most fun when I speak to either Azure professionals or just professionals who don't touch the data as much, because it's really enabling to get exposure to the cognitive services and realize how achievable it is to start folding these tools into your dev stack. So today what I'd like to talk about is I'll go through a little bit of a high-level overview of the cognitive services. And if you were with us this morning, Neela did an outstanding job covering a lot of the cognitive services. So definitely, if you're in this session and you're interested in AI, you want to go ahead and take a look at Neela's session as well. We're going to go ahead and build a classifier. So we'll be using the custom vision service to create a classifier, and it'll be kind of like a state machine for a maintenance-related type of a challenge or question. I'm going to go through an introduction of Azure Notebooks, and this is going to get merged into the new code spaces that's going to be available later on this year. We'll do a little bit of our interaction with Base API using the Azure Notebooks. And I thought just for fun, we talk about AI on containers. So a big part of kind of the capabilities there is the increased focus that we have as far as how we are stewards of data that's related to machine learning projects and AI projects. So I also want to cover a little bit about the new Microsoft tools for responsible machine learning. So thank you today for joining me, and I hope you learned something that you didn't know was out there during the session today. So let's start with getting to know cognitive services. And it's kind of interesting because I actually have a lot of people throughout my organization who come up to me at my desk or send me a ping, and they want to know, what is AI? And after they ask what is AI, they ask, what are our capabilities and what are Microsoft's capabilities and what are the things that I can do today to add AI into my product portfolio. So the resource that I really enjoy pointing people to is the AI demo site. So the AI demo site is maintained by Microsoft, and it's going to be that entryway into interacting with the cognitive services. So we can go ahead and scroll down, and you can see that you have the ability to try out many of the cognitive services functionalities here. So we'll just quickly get started with text analytics. We can go ahead and jump in. And if we think about what's happening here, is what we're doing is we have kind of a form, and what we're doing is we're passing data back to the API. So this is the Cognitive Services API. So what is that? Now, the Cognitive Services APIs are pre-trained machine learning models that Microsoft has gone ahead and built and developed. Now, what does that mean that they've built and developed these modules? What it means is they've gone ahead and curated the data to build the machine learning models against. They've trained the data, and there's a certain degree of confidence in the results of the machine learning module. So what does that mean for you? That means you don't have to spin up compute to run these services. You don't have to write any machine learning code. You don't have to do any tuning, and you don't have to do any research. You don't have to curate data, and you don't have to maintain your curated data, because these are all models that Microsoft works on and maintains the accuracy for. So the models are also hosted on Microsoft's compute and is offered as a service. So you also don't have to worry about maintaining the compute that's running these traditionally compute intensive exercises when it comes to tuning and training a machine learning module. So when we look at text analytics, many of us are familiar with the sentiment analyst functionality. So I can go ahead and enter in a statement, and with COVID, we usually go to Hawaii because my family is there, but we've been taking the little one to Florida lately. And Florida has beaches, thankfully, so we can go ahead and enter in, my daughter loves Florida. And you notice that the analyzer has gone ahead and pulled out Florida from the statement, and we have a 96% positive rating on this. So we can go ahead and continue on. And this is just a little bit of a side note, but Wikipedia is one of the sources that was used to perform this training. So when you're using the text analyzer and you're passing either phrases or places or things that are also included in Wikipedia, then your accuracy rating is going to be that much higher because it was part of the training set. But this really gives insight into the amount of data that is used to train these cognitive services models. And then when you abstract that away to what would it take for you to personally cultivate and maintain that data set, and also produce a machine learning module with this type of results, you can see that Microsoft is taking a lot of that work away and making that available to a huge amount of people. So it really is enabling the general population to perform AI and machine learning activities. So this is something that we're going to see a lot more of is cognitive search is quickly becoming something that people are embedding in their websites a lot more frequently. So you'll see powered by Bing on a lot more websites where it'll go ahead and let you index your content. And a lot of us have tons and tons of content on our website. And then you no longer have to maintain those indexes. The cognitive search will go ahead and do that for you. Now today we're going to talk about vision. And this is the fun, and I really enjoy talking to people about the capabilities here. So the computer vision service is again, it's a pre-packaged service. So it's pre-packaged, it's pre-trained. So Microsoft has collected and curated a defined set of images, and they are able to have results with a certain degree of confidence. So the 4 core capabilities of the Vision API is going to be analyze and describe images, and we see that a lot. So we'll have tags with degrees of confidence pulled out of images. Then you see here that we have a combination of text AI in here, where the Vision API will actually reply back with what it thinks is being represented in the image. So that's one of the things that I truly enjoy about the Microsoft suite, is that the services are so intertwined that when there are improvements in any of the services, they really flow to the rest of the product suite. So you can tell that as Microsoft continues to curate their data set and make improvements to their algorithms, and this confidence level goes up, I'll be able to continue to leverage those learnings in my Vision API. So another thing to note is the adult content ratings. And a lot of us kind of see some of these articles about AI ethics, but it's really amazing when you start working with the product as far as the capabilities that are already there. So we're already able to perform adult classification on images. There's capabilities of doing that in the video indexer, and again in speech. So these capabilities are already available, and they're intertwined through many of the cognitive services out there. And these are just tools and capabilities that we can already leverage and embed into our applications. So another core capability is pulling text out of images. So I can go ahead and pull out the number 42, and it's noted here 2 times. And the API is able to understand both. I've got handwriting and imagery. And then the last one is kind of sort of funny, because you wonder, what was the use case and what was the early customer that drove this? So it's recognized celebrities and landmarks, but you notice it's recognized celebrities and not recognized Alicia and Pete, right? And again, these services are pre-built. They're built on top of a curated data set, and it's supervised learning. So what that means is we are giving the machine learning module a set of images that's pre-labeled so that we can predict with a certain degree of accuracy that an image from an outside set will validate as part of that set. So I am not a celebrity, so they probably don't have enough pictures of me with a certain degree of confidence to guarantee that a new picture of me is me. So that's why it's called celebrities and landmarks, and not identify everybody based on their driver's license or something like that. So it's kind of interesting to me because as we move forward and Microsoft has so much going on in the open source domain, that you can really see that these niche data sets are potentially going to be commodities where you can drive very specific insights on these data domains with these embellished data sets. So I definitely see that coming up in the future, and a lot nearer than we think it is. So that's a tour of the computer vision service. And again, this is AI demos, and it's a website that I always refer people to. They maintain the website. It's an easy, well, what does the API do? And you don't have to spin up any Azure resources or do any coding to utilize it. So we'll go ahead and go back to the deck. So we've talked about computer vision, and the ask is, you know, we know what the computer vision API is capable of. What if we have our own use case? So what if I have a field of cows, and I have named all of my cows, and the computer vision service will go ahead and appropriately label that each of my cows is a cow. But I want to get to the point where I can identify all of my cows in all of my images, you know. And so what are the use cases for that? You know, so say my favorite cow is Sally, and Sally will walk 10 miles a day, and she goes from the barn to the watering trough, and maybe she'll take a stroll with her friends. And there's that consistent 10 miles a day. So if I want an early alert as to, hey, maybe something's wrong with Sally, then what would be a way for me to identify visually that she's maybe not moved for an entire day and is just sitting under the tree looking sadly out at her friends. And these are some of the things that we can provide results against using custom vision without using a huge amount of sensors. So another use case that I like to talk about. So with the classifier, we go ahead and upload images and evaluate. And the classifier would also enable us to conduct object detection. So we'd be able to identify more than one. So this is how many cows are in the picture versus how many Sallys. And let me see if I can get this video to run. Okay. So one of the use cases that I had been talking to Pete about was predictive maintenance with flood alerting. And we're down in Houston. We have very angry rain here. And the flooding can be very, very quick. So when you think about all the things and all the telemetry, all the data points, all the math and the calculations that you need to build your own weather alerting system, then the task gets to be quite enormous. But when I'm looking at this video, And this is through cameras that are already mounted and they're maintained by the water district. You know, if I'm just standing here and I'm looking down the waterway, then it's very easy for me to see that hey, I have enough of a visual cue to alert people as to whether or not this waterway is flooding. So, you know, the real question is there an opportunity for us to take something like this, which would be like the weather reporting system, which it's got global data, it's got climate forecasting data, then all that has to be ETL'd into database servers and then processed, and then after you've aggregated the data, you definitely have to curate the data and use the machine learning module. And then you can go ahead and do your reporting and your analytics. But so is there a way for us to take something that traditionally looks like this and make it look a lot simpler? And the answer is yes. So I've been very successfully able to create models with under 30 images that enable me to indicate whether or not that waterway is in a flooded state or a not flooded state. And 30 images is probably a little on the lighter side, but when you look at how enabling that is versus the complication of these other systems, you can see that there's a lot of opportunity there for us to simplify and decouple some of these learning systems and situations that have historically heavily relied on these little bits of data. So as an example, what I'd like to do today is I'd like to help you build a classifier, and we're going to see how easy it can be to build a custom vision classifier. So what we'll go ahead and do is we're going to go to customvision.ai, and let me just grab my images. Okay. So I get to do a lot of fun stuff. So I did a Find the Puppy project with my daughter the other day. So that's what that is. So Custom Vision AI is going to give you a place to host your custom vision projects. You get 2 projects free. So we're going to go ahead and create a new project. We're going to go ahead and we'll do some perimeter monitoring. And I do have a resource already set up. And we're going to perform classification and just single tag. Now, when I look at my images, I can go ahead and pull my images out. And what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to provide, we're going to do some state alerting. So what it is I want to give the classifier conditions where the state is a good state. So this use case scenario is we have a lot of fences around the perimeter, and maybe we're an oil field or we're an agricultural farm, and it's a very expensive amount of space, and we're looking at what is the ROI for embedding IoT sensors either, you know, X many feet throughout the fence versus setting up a monitoring system where we can use visual cues to trigger that human alerting. And I have my images here of fences. And the situation that I would like to alert on is I would like to be alerted when animals are stuck in my fence. And I grow vegetables outdoors, and I've noticed that 10 to 15% of my crop is getting eaten by goats. So this is definitely affecting my revenue. So how can I alert when this scenario happens, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and I have my images of animals stuck in fences, and I have my fences without the animals. And then I have a couple of images for testing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and upload into our project. These domains are, as I noted, there are some subsets of curated data that provides more specific responses. So with the food and the retail domains, those are images specifically of food items or specifically of retail items, so that your accuracy with those types of images is that much higher and that much relevant. So, and then we had seen the celebrities and landmarks, so that's what that domain is here. We're just going to go ahead and use the general domain. I'm gonna go ahead and add my images. I went ahead and did a quick tag, so it lets me tag all of the images at the same time. I can go ahead and my second set of images is going to be for my everything's okay situation. So I'm just going to tag those as negative. And I can do a quick train. And I am on the free tier, so the training might take a little bit longer. But you can see how powerful this tool is. I haven't done any machine learning coding. I didn't have to understand any math. I didn't have to do a lot of manipulation. My precision is a little bit on the lower side. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick test. And go to my testing, and we'll go ahead and pass a go. So there's a 99.9% probability that this is a picture of a goat stuck in a fence. Now, I might have clicked through very, very quickly, but you can see how powerful this tool is, where you can have programmers, or you can have any type of IT person, you can have data analysts, you can have your SMEs using this tool, and they can do this preliminary investigative analysis against these use cases and see if they're able to prove out their theories without having to go through the expensive software development and life cycles that traditional machine learning developers have had to go through. And you look at the speed of being able to use the environment and get a result and prove a result. And it's really wonderful what they've been able to do as far as enabling everybody to be able to use AI without having to start from the bottom. So that's what I really love about custom vision. So I did use very little images. There was just 20 images. So I did notice if I go ahead and pick up this second image, it does think that the goat's okay. And this is one of the things that you need to keep in mind when you're using the custom vision application is that what you're doing with vision is you're training the model by example. You're not writing if-then statements. You're not writing case statements or switch statements with the code. What you're doing is you're visually giving examples of cases. So when you're building your custom vision model and you're looking to increase your accuracy, what you want to do is you want to give enough instances of the situation where the model will be able to correctly assign these true or falses when you're looking at these state questions. And this is one of the things that kind of makes me laugh with applications that you're able to unlock with your face. And it's because I think about, and I do enjoy my sweets, so I think about how much my face changes throughout the years and how, you know, my hair changes, I change my glasses, and it just amazes me because, you know, it's just a matter of time that I'm going to get locked out of whatever application or whatever phone because my face changes so much and there's no way for them to keep ahead of my changes, right? So that's one of the considerations with vision, lighting, angle, quantity, variety. Peter and I were talking a little bit about construction, and you know, people like to experiment in very clean, safe places. So you're a programmer and your machine learning developer will be at their desk in an office writing software to be used in the field. So if you're using these brand new Caterpillar machines that are shiny and brand new for your machine learning, and you're training your machine against those types of images, then when you get onto the field and those machines now have chip paint, or they're covered in mud, or they're a different color, like all these variations are things that you need to keep in mind when you're building your model, because that becomes an unknown variable, and that if it's frequent enough, it will become an unknown variable that will give you that false negative. So we've gone through custom vision, and we've seen how easy it is to use. What I'd like to talk about next is Azure Notebooks. And again, my background is heavily in data and reporting. And Azure Notebooks is an environment that I like to use to write my Python code. So if you're not a data person or you're not a developer of data projects or data engineering, then you might work with data science teams and you might be on the DevOps side trying to get them into source control. So Azure Notebooks is great because it's the flavor of Jupyter Notebooks for Azure. So if your data scientists have software installed locally on their PC that they're not syncing to GitHub, then Azure Notebooks is definitely one of those tools that you want to get them exposed to so that they're aware that, yes, there is a cloud solution for working with data science code and integrating it with source code. So let me go ahead and jump into my project. Now, Neela did like a really great job this morning talking about the Face API. So I'm going to talk about a couple of different functionalities than what she covered this morning, just to make sure you're entertained. And what I'd like to start off with first is the documentation pages. So we've been talking about the cognitive services being APIs, and we've been talking about passing data back and forth. But because they're pre-built, you really want to look at the API pages to know exactly what functionality is included there. So I do start off with the API pages. And we can see here that the post commands are listed. And the face is really, it will pull out the different triangles and features of the face, and then it'll kind of aggregate those into groups. So the features form a face, and then the face forms a group. And then you can do analysis as far as whether a face is part of a group. So if you're looking at building and curating a data set of my faces to recognize me so that you can let me into my application, then my face becomes part of a group. But the really interesting thing about the API pages is, if you go ahead and scroll down, are the code samples. So Microsoft makes it very easy to get up and running and started on integrating with these APIs and these code samples. And you can see that we've got the C#, Java, and I use a lot of Python. So to start communicating with your API, really all you really need is to pass in your subscription key, and if the API requests it, the API parameters. So we're back here in the Jupyter Notebook, and you can see that you can integrate both markup and markdown in the Jupyter Notebook. And this is functionality that's very similar to what's available in the Data Studio tools or the SQL Management Studio. And what is going on is that we are actually separating out the code from the compute. So your notebook is running on compute, and then the queries and the processing is running on a separate instance. So I have a reference to my application key, my parameters. This is the name of my service right here. And I can go ahead and show you an image of So this is my testing image. So I have 1, 2, 3 speakers standing with me, and I'm person number 3. So there's 4 of us total. And I can go ahead and run that. One, two, three, 4. And thankfully, the API is saying that my mustache is not visible today. So we've got 1, 2, and then there's an indication that the first speaker is male, the second speaker is male, the third speaker is female, and the fourth speaker is male. And so there is a lot of variables that go into defining sex in images. So that's part of the reason why I added in the check for the mustache and sideburns, because I think the combination of the variables is a little more telling than just the results from the API. So I would recommend putting in some type of a check in any of your auto analysis so that you can have something that says, hey, you know, that's likely, but it's also likely because this is also true. And then it's kind of that second check when you're doing the analysis. And part of it is because this is supervised learning, you don't know what the data set is. So if you don't know what the data set is, and this is why there are concerns about the abilities of these types of APIs or machine learning algorithms to identify across nationalities, is because the data set is so specialized, we probably need different identifiers based on the location or based on ethnicity, because we do have different drivers and identifiers across the world. So if I'm looking at characteristics that are common to people in my region, they're definitely going to be different than characteristics of people who are in another region. So when we're looking at using tools like this, the use case that probably makes the most sense is really going to be for classification, like auto classification of and meta tagging of historical data. So we've been accumulating all this data for a huge amount of time, and now we're trying to action that data. We're moving that data off of storage somewhere in the basement, and we're moving all that to Azure. So how useful is that data? You know, well, we don't know how useful it is until we know what it is. And there's huge capabilities in AI to help us with that auto classification. You know, we can run through all the files and categorize all the text and categorize all the images, and then we can say, and especially with GDPR, where we have to be very cognizant of how we treat our customers' data and our customers' images, now we can definitively say that all the pictures that we have of Alicia have been deleted from the server because she has requested it. And these are the tools that are going to help us get there. So I'm not kind of as sure as far as down to the people level, like forward thinking wise, I think historically it'll help us with some of those auditing requirements, but I think forward thinking wise, I think we're going to see a lot more restrictions as far as how our visual presences are treated and how that data is maintained. So I think moving forward, maybe we think there's a lot that we're going to be able to do with it, but I think that the technology is ahead of the regulation, and I think there's enough going on out there that the regulation is going to start catching up. And just when we start designing these systems, we should really be aware that of these considerations, because it definitely is going to affect our design. So Face API, use it on people who are absolutely aware and expecting for their visual presence to be used. So like this scenario, I used it on speakers, and I definitely asked them for their permission to use their image and to retain and maintain their image. And that's just a big consideration with the Face API. Okay, so one of the things that Microsoft has done really well as far as addressing some of these data concerns is to make these services available on containers. So I would like to talk very quickly about AI on containers. And this is something that we can do to help protect our data. So a lot of our customers are fearful of putting their data into Azure. So what can we do? So there are a number of containers that are available for each of the suites. So Vision will do the anomaly, the face recognition, form recognizer, speech to text to speech, and then text, all the sentiment analysis so all the core competencies and capabilities for text is available via a container. So they make it very, very easy to get started. I went ahead and installed Docker on my PC. Within 4 commands, I was able to get the container installed and running. So it did take a while. So I didn't want to have everybody kind of waiting while I ran through that. But I do have it up and running so that we can start playing with the API. So if we step through this code, we start off with a quick Docker pull. And then the next line is just, we'll go ahead and define what port we want that container listening on. So the default is the 5000 port. So I've got a little 1 CPU machine, 8 GBs. What I'm passing is I'm passing the name of my cognitive service along with the API key. And it took me maybe about 7 or 8 minutes to download the container. And what it'll go ahead and do is it'll go ahead and spit out a little alert when it's up and running and available. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and let's get So I've gone ahead and pinged that 5000 port, and the entry page will say your Azure Cognitive Services container is up and running. And it'll actually go ahead and give you a page that's very similar to the API page and very similar to Postman functionality to go ahead and test your calls. So again, we can see that I'm on the 5000 port. I'm just going to do an easy sentiment analysis. I can go ahead and update this text. So I can stay with the Florida theme. And then I can go ahead and execute my call. So this is my Docker running in the background, and I'm going to wait for the response to come through. So for this statement, my daughter loves Florida, I have that as a positive statement. I need ice cream, I had a bad day, I have that as a negative statement. And we can see that we've had meter usage of 3 units passed back to my cognitive services model in the cloud. So what this means is I can go ahead and use the custom vision AI and use portal.azure.com, and I can go ahead and build and create my models. I can maintain my models, I can optimize my models in that environment. And what I can do is I can locally process images, text, and documents on site. And at the container level, the container will go ahead and communicate meter usage to my cognitive services model in the cloud. So when we're looking at these situations where we're working in the field or at a manufacturing plant or on a boat in the middle of the ocean where we want to process a lot of this data locally on, say, an edge device, then that's really where the capabilities come forward as far as being able to do all of this on a container. So, and then as long as we have that communication, I can actually disconnect from the internet and run these analyses, and it'll go ahead and internally check against the meter. And then when I'm back online, it'll go ahead and sync again. So when we're looking at building these maintenance systems, there's a lot of capability here for us to be processing data locally versus offline. So the last thing that I wanted to cover, and it's more of a point of reference to increase awareness, is responsible ML. And there's so much change, there's so much attention, there's so much legislation that I see coming up that I think the way we use AI today is not going to be the way we use AI in the next 6 months to a year. And we've seen this a lot with schools and universities who are disallowing facial recognition of their students. There's different agencies that are disallowing facial recognition. So I really suggest, if you're looking at this field, if you're looking at integrating these capabilities into your software, try to at least keep an eye on the legislature that's coming out for responsible ML, so that you can kind of get an idea of kind of the longevity of your solution. Like, are you building a solution that your client is going to be able to use in the next 3 to 5 years, or is it totally not taking privacy into consideration, and is this something that they're going to get into trouble for, right? So there was a lot of really good sessions on governance today, and I know we all take data stewardship very seriously, and machine learning modules are built on data. So these are really things that we should keep in mind when we're building these systems. So this is more of a takeaway. Microsoft has spent a lot of time with different research partners to build up the suite of responsible machine learning tools out there that are available in the Microsoft environment. So there's a couple of tools out there, Interpret ML and FairLearn, where the machine learning algorithm is no longer a black box. It helps you assign metadata and tags so that you can kind of evaluate your model and say whether or not it's fair, and part of that is abstracting the data. So when you have information like my age and my sex, and you're feeding that into the model, then how much is that influencing the outcome? And some of these tools will let you abstract, like the white noise will let you abstract a lot of that information away so that the calculation is performed on anonymized type of a set of data. So this is more of a takeaway, but definitely encourage you to take a look if you're working with these projects. And thank you. I think I'm just about out of time, and I hope that everybody has kind of realized that there's many more ways out there for us to integrate with AI than I think we realize, and it's coming down the pipe very, very quickly. And I truly believe in the next 3 to 5 years, everybody who touches any type of software is going to be using AI.
Yeah, just about perfect timing, Alicia. You've got just a couple of minutes left, but we've got time blocked out for Q&A, which is good because you have some questions. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, I'll start firing questions your way. So what is the first is from Robert. He asked, what is the relationship between Azure Notebooks and Azure Machine Learning Workspaces? I mean, he notices that Azure Machine Learning Workspaces uses Jupyter Notebooks as well. Is this the same service, or did they target different uses?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. It's going to be the same technology. Azure Notebooks was really, I think, a less complicated way to get started with writing code in Azure as far as Python and R. So what the notebooks are is they're really the Jupyter Notebooks, which is open source, and kind of crafted to work in the Azure environment. So that was one of the first tools that Microsoft kind of folded into Azure. Now they have Databricks, of course, available in Azure, and Machine Learning Studio has been built out in Azure. But the short answer is it's exactly like Jupyter Notebooks, but available in Azure.
Great. Next question. So in the scenarios you're working in, that you like the ones you showed us today, how much training is enough training for your scenarios, or is cognitive vision just fully trained out of the box?
Yeah, well, so we looked at two different scenarios. So the first scenario that we looked at for AI demos is fully trained out of the box. So when we looked at that picture with the tags with the description underneath, nothing we can do will change the results because the computer vision API is already built and trained, and is that result is that result. Now, where we can influence results is with custom vision. And with custom vision, where we went ahead and uploaded the fence with the goats, that's where we can make changes to the outcome. And it's really, you know, with any analysis, because really AI is analysis, right? Your results is only as good as the data you put into it, right? So it's really going to be how specific is your question, and that's going to influence how specific your sample data has to be. So say we take the cow situation, right? So if we're just trying to identify which cows in a herd are and I'm not, up to speed on the cows, but award-winning steers versus milk cows, right? And that's probably a simpler case where you need two distinct sets of images, and you can probably get away with a smaller number. But if you have a field of 1,000 cows and you're trying to identify them each individually by name, then it would take those 1,000 cows times, and then you'd probably want to get different angles of the cows. So, frontal images to the left, to the right, over the shoulder, then lighting. So is there a lot of light? Is it towards dusk where it's a little bit darker? Is the cow standing behind a tree? Is it sitting? Is it tipped over or drinking out of the water trough? So all these variations improve the effectiveness of your model. So if you feed in only pictures of cows standing up, and then you try to test your model with the picture of the cow sitting down, then that's a use case that it hasn't been properly trained for. So the answer is going to be it depends. Sorry.
No, that's and to break that down into really simple terms, because you're really smart. So it's really the difference between training for an instance versus training for a type. All the cow as a type of animal versus a specific cow, and then to your point, position and light conditions can tell the algorithm what's normal. And I remember a good bad example of AI where I think it was a state fishery was trying to train a model for a specific type of fish. And they found that when they sort of reverse engineered and had the model draw a picture or render a picture of the fish, it rendered a model of the fish with what looked like 4 little sausages at each end. And it's because they had fed it the algorithm so many pictures of fish being held by people, that the algorithm had learned that the fish had these fingers on it. So I think I get your point there. That's a good point. So it sounds like our training requirement, though, if we're getting into instances of the cow, our training requirement really goes up exponentially. And then also, if we want to be able to recognize in a variety of conditions, right?
Yeah, and these models are exportable. So so there are companies doing very intensive work with very complicated use cases on vision, and what the Microsoft API lets us do is it lets us do the very easy cases where we can do more use case defining. So, you know, when you're asking the question at the beginning of the data science project, you know, how specific are we querying? You know, this lets you answer some of those questions without getting into the more complicated types of coding. So what you can do is you can go ahead and get started with cognitive services, and then go ahead and export the model out of custom vision and import it into another type of software, and continue on if what you're trying to answer isn't answerable in custom vision.
Sure, sure. And one more question for you here. And this is similar to a question we heard for Neela this morning when she was talking about facial recognition and the Face API. So facial recognition being a big topic in cybersecurity, do you find a lot of customers using facial recognition for security purposes, or do you see it being used for other things like retail?
So I see it not being, I see so many flags with it that I don't think that there will be a lot of use cases. So just because of the hurdles, so to use somebody's visage, their image, you need to request permission, and then when you store their image, you need to request their permission. So I do see it less and less of that being used, just given what's been going on with legislation and the concerns that are being raised by different groups. So maybe some fun things, but you know, it's kind of like with data breaches, right? It takes a data breach and a set of losses for people to realize that they don't have the controls in place. And I think a lot of these systems just don't have the controls in place quite yet. And it's because it's newer technology and newer use cases, right?
Yeah, so issues of privacy, issues of ethics. Yeah. It's complicated for sure. So Alicia, that is just perfect on time. So we've been doing just perfect all day, and you continue that trend, not surprisingly. Thank you for a great session. I'm so happy you agreed to join us. Alex from Australia says, great session. Manjit as well says, thanks very much. You've got folks headed down the AI road. And so we'll look forward to seeing you again, I hope. And we have our next.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Alicia.